Welcome to TalkTickers.
Hello.
We're going to dive deep into the Evaxion first quarter 2025 earnings call today.
Yeah, and I think the main takeaway, sort of the headline from the call, was really one of solid progress.
Improved financials definitely stood out, and they've got a very packed second half of the year coming up. Lots of potential milestones.
Absolutely. It felt like they were setting the stage for some pretty significant events down the line.
Okay, so let's maybe unpack the numbers first.
Yeah.
The financials.
Good place to start.
The cash position, right. That saw a really big improvement in Q1. They ended the quarter with $17.8 million.
Which is, a huge jump from just $6 million at the end of 2024.
Exactly. And that obviously helped the balance sheet overall.
Yeah, it directly boosted their total equity. That went up to $10.3 million.
And importantly, that puts them comfortably back above the NASDAQ listing requirements,
Right, which is always a key stability point for companies this size. Removes an overhang.
Okay. And operationally, the operating loss for Q1
came in at $3.9 million.
And what's interesting there is it's actually lower than the $4.4 million loss they had in Q1 last year.
Right. So operationally, things are, tightening up a bit, improving year over year.
The net loss was $1.6 million this quarter. Last year, they actually reported net income. But there's a reason for that difference, right?
Yeah, they pointed out that the net figure was heavily influenced by some financial income dynamics, something about a derivative liability linked to warrants.
Okay.
So the key thing operationally is that the loss from their actual core business activities, that did improve compared to last year.
Got it. That makes sense. And probably the most critical point from the cash situation is the runway it gives them.
Definitely. They project that cash position should last them until mid-2026.
And their estimated operational cash burn for the full year is around $14 million.
Approximately, yes. And that's before considering any potential income from, say, new business development deal.
Which is the perfect segue, right? Because BD is a huge focus for them.
It really is. It's central to their strategy.
And the big one everyone's watching is the Merck partnership.
Still very much on track, they confirmed. They're expecting a potential option exercise decision from Merck in the second half of this year, 2025.
And it's a really key milestone, isn't it?
Absolutely critical. If Merck exercises the options for both compounds in that deal, that triggers a $10 million payment to Evaxion.
$10 million. You compare that to the $14 million annual burn rate?
Exactly. That one payment could potentially extend their cash runway significantly further, maybe well into 2027, depending on other factors.
Okay. And beyond Merck, they're still sticking to their target of signing at least 2 new BD deals this year.
They are, yes. That target remains. But they were also pretty upfront about the challenges.
Right. They acknowledge the execution risk is increasing.
Yeah, and they tied that directly to the turmoil in the financial markets right now, plus increased regulatory uncertainty that's making potential partners maybe a bit more cautious.
They even gave an example, didn't they? One potential partner paused talks.
Paused discussions to focus on their own internal later stage assets, which, seems like a pretty common reaction in this kind of environment.
So how are they planning to deal with that, mitigate that risk?
Well, they said they're actively trying to focus their BD efforts on potential partners who they think might be less impacted by the current macro headwinds.
Sort of strategically targeting companies maybe with different financial situations or priorities.
Exactly. Finding those who might still be looking for external innovation right now. Okay, maybe we should shift gears to the R&D pipeline. There was a lot happening there too.
Yeah, definitely. Let's start with EVX-01. That's their personalized cancer vaccine, phase 2.
Right. They highlighted some pretty strong new data they presented back in April at AACR.
What were the key points there?
Well, the data showed that 80% of the new antigens targeted by the vaccine, these are the unique markers on a specific patient's tumor, actually elicited an immune response.
80%. That sounds quite high.
It is. And they emphasize that this frequency was substantially higher than what's been reported publicly for some similar candidates from other companies. So a potentially differentiating data point.
And did it also show durability or breadth of response?
Yeah, they said the immunizations were shown to increase and also maintain the broadness of the T-cell responses, which is obviously crucial.
Okay. And the main trial readout is still on track?
Still tracking towards that 2-year data readout in the second half of 2025.
They also mentioned starting an extension study.
That's right. Just dosed the first patient in a 1-year trial extension for EVX-01.
And what's the plan for that extension?
What's quite interesting is they'll be administering EVX-01 as a monotherapy in this part.
So by itself.
Yeah.
Not combined with checkpoint inhibitors like in the main trial.
Exactly, which should give them a clearer picture of the vaccine's standalone effect.
That seems like a smart move, especially if it doesn't cost much extra.
Right, they noted minimal additional cost since the sites are running and vaccines being made anyway. Oh, and in the Q&A, they gave a bit more detail on the type of T-cell response.
Oh, yeah.
Mainly CD4 T-cells, but they do see CD8 responses in about half the patients. They linked that CD4 bias mainly to the peptide-based nature of their vaccine platform.
Okay, so CD4 driving coordination, some CD8 for direct killing. Got it. So that's the personalized approach. But they're also working on something different, right? This precision cancer vaccine idea.
Yes, exactly. This uses their AI immunology platform, but targets different kinds of antigens. Novel, shared tumor antigens.
Shared meaning found across multiple patients, not just one individual. I think I heard the term herb antigens used.
Yeah, that's the concept antigens potentially derived from human endogenous retroviruses, things that might be expressed more broadly across certain tumor types.
And the goal here is different from the personalized vaccine.
Right. The big picture goal is an off-the-shelf vaccine, something easier to manufacture and potentially usable in a much broader patient population.
Including maybe patients who don't respond well to current immunotherapies.
Potentially, yes. That's part of the aim.
And where are they with this concept?
Well, they've shown proof of concept in mouse models, protection from tumors, specific T-cell responses.
Okay.
And now they're really digging into the data to find the best human targets. They've curated these huge data sets, over 3,000 looking at gene and protein activity, and over 1,000 looking at the specific protein fragments presented to the immune system on tumors.
Wow, that's a lot of data, all to feed the AI platform.
Exactly. To optimize the AI for selecting the best lead candidate for this precision vaccine, they expect to make that selection in the second half of this year.
And are they preparing for clinical trials already?
Yes, they mentioned initiating IND and CTA-enabling activities. So the preclinical work and regulatory prep needed to eventually get into human testing in the US and Europe.
And just to clarify, this is planned as a separate off-the-shelf product, not combined with the personalized one.
Correct. Initially, the intention is for it to be a standalone, off-the-shelf vaccine.
Okay. And they're using that same AI platform for infectious diseases too, right?
They are expanding the pipeline there. They see a lot of potential using their AI immunology tools in that space as well.
Any specific candidates coming soon?
Yeah, the first of 2 planned new vaccine candidates in infectious disease is on track for launch, meaning entering the pipeline in the first half of 2025, focusing initially on bacterial pathogens.
How do they choose those targets?
They mentioned a pretty comprehensive assessment process involving external expert panels to help guide the selection.
And there's a second one planned too.
Yes, a second infectious disease candidate is planned to enter the pipeline in the second half of 2025.
Okay. There was also some discussion around that news from the UK about potentially repurposing a meningitis vaccine for gonorrhea.
Right. They brought that up in the Q&A. They basically see that news as validation.
Validation of what?
Validation of the significant unmet medical need for something like gonorrhea, and therefore the commercial potential for their own gonorrhea program, which is called EVAX B2.
So the fact that people are looking at repurposing existing vaccines shows there's a real need.
Exactly. And while there is some known scientific rationale for cross-protection between meningitis and gonorrhea bugs, they emphasized it's incomplete. It highlights the need for a more, precision vaccine approach like theirs.
Got it. Reinforces the market opportunity.
Mm-hmm. And underlying all of this, the oncology work, the infectious disease expansion is the core AI immunology platform itself.
Right. That seems to be the engine driving everything.
Absolutely. They made it clear that continuing to optimize and improve that platform is fundamental. That huge data curation effort we talked about, that's key for making the platform better at discovering novel targets across the board.
So if we zoom out a bit and look at the rest of the year, the second half of 2025 looks, incredibly busy for Evaxion.
Definitely. It's packed. The major milestones they flagged are that critical Merck decision on the options.
Okay.
The 2-year data readout from the EVX-01 phase 2 trial.
Right.
Selecting the lead candidate for their precision cancer vaccine concept. Hitting their target of securing at least 2 new business development agreements.
Okay. Still aiming for that.
And bringing that second infectious disease candidate into the pipeline.
That's a lot of potential news flow.
Each one of those is a potential value catalyst for the company.
So thinking about this from an investor angle, That improved financial position, the extended runway.
Mm,
That's really significant, isn't it?
hugely significant. It provides stability. It means they have the resources, hopefully, to get past these key data readouts and partner decisions without immediate pressure to raise more capital.
And the strategy of having both oncology and infectious disease programs.
It's a deliberate diversification play, yeah. Both pipelines are powered by that same core AI platform, which they position as the central engine that can generate multiple shots on goal and attract different kinds of partners.
And those H2 2025 milestones are clearly being positioned as potential inflection points.
Absolutely. They're framing them as events that could unlock significant value. And while, yes, they acknowledge the challenging BD environment,
Right, the execution risk.
they also stressed they're being strategic about navigating it. And you see them active at conferences, which is key for that multi-partner strategy, getting those initial conversations going.
Okay, now we have to say this very clearly. The next part is absolutely not financial advice.
Not even close.
This is purely for illustration. Think of it as a kind of thought experiment. Taking the information from the call and imagining some outrageous but plausible trade ideas based only on what we've just discussed. Please do not act on this.
Seriously, this is just hypothetical spitballing,
Yeah.
connecting the dots we've outlined in a potentially aggressive way, just to illustrate how these specific catalysts could, in theory, be viewed by the market.
Okay, disclaimer, force field engaged. Trade idea number 1.
Let's hear it.
Given that runway extension and those big potential catalysts concentrated in H225 Merck decision, EVX01 data, you could imagine someone considering a highly leveraged long position.
How leveraged?
Like way out of the money call options, time to expire after those potential H2 events.
Okay, the rationale being?
The rationale is these are pretty binary events, right? Positive news on Merck exercising the option or really strong EVX01 data could cause a sharp, maybe even dramatic upward move in the stock.
And options would amplify that gain significantly.
Exactly. But the flip side is massive risk.
Huge risk. If the news isn't good or even just meets expectations, those options could easily expire worthless. It's a pure bet on major positive surprises.
Right. High risk, high potential reward based purely on those catalysts. Okay, trade idea number 2, a bit more complex.
Okay.
A pairs trade. Remember how they emphasized EVX01's 80% immune response rate being higher than competitors?
Mm-hmm. They definitely highlighted that.
So theoretically, you could short a competitor in the personalized cancer vaccine space.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe one that recently reported less impressive immune data, if you could find one.
Okay, short the competitor.
And simultaneously, go long Evaxion, specifically playing into that EVX01 2-year data readout expected in H2.
So it's a relative value bet.
Exactly. You're betting that Evaction's potentially superior immune response translates into better clinical data compared to a perceived weaker competitor. You're playing the differential.
Makes sense conceptually, but managing a pairs trade like that is complex, right? You need to pick the right short, manage both legs.
No, definitely more complex.
Yeah.
And still carries significant risk. Again, these are purely theoretical illustrations.
Absolutely not recommendations. Just ways to think about how specific details from an earnings call, like catalyst timing and differentiated data points, might be interpreted in the market.
Right. So just to recap the main takeaways from this deep dive into the Evaxion call.
Yeah, I think we saw evidence of strong operational execution, definitely a significantly strengthened financial position, giving them stability, and a very clear roadmap for the second half of 2025 that's just loaded with potential value drivers.
And the strategy seems clear.
Yeah.
Focus on realizing value from the platform and the pipeline, keep pursuing that multi-partner approach, and hope that Merck decision comes through to potentially boost the cash runway even further.
So we've tried to pull out the key insights and data points from the call for you, covered the highlights, the upcoming milestones.
So as you digest all this, maybe think about which of those H2 milestones feels like the biggest needle mover to you. Is it the Merck partnership, the EVX01 clinical data, or maybe the potential breakthrough with that off-the-shelf precision vaccine concept?
Definitely going to be an interesting second half of the year to watch for Evaxion.